The Philadelphia Eagles are Super Bowl champions. Eagles fans everywhere, this is for you. Let the celebration begin.
Hey everyone, Happy New Year. Do you like that joke, group? Happy New Year.
Oh, new league year.
Yeah, it's new league year.
I was a little confused there for a second, but yeah. The long-awaited March 17th finally arrives.
Yeah, we are off and running on this Eagle Eye podcast, and the NFL is off and running on the 2021 league year. It started at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, so a lot can happen now. All the things you've heard are going to happen, basically. All the agreements that were reached, all the trades that were reached, all those things can become official now. So we're going to talk about one of those big moves. It's the Carson Wentz trade. It's now official. It also meant something, this deadline for Derek Barnett. We'll get into that. John Clark on his podcast, Takeoff with John Clark, had Doug Pederson. So we'll have a few takeaways from that. Some other stuff, Marquise Goodwin, Zach Ertz, and we'll look at some of the contracts a few former Eagles got with the Patriots. But we're going to start today with the Carson Wentz trade. It's finally official, almost a month after the agreement was reached. Both teams announced it, and we expect Carson Wentz will have a press conference later this week. We also expect Howie Roseman will be available later this week to really talk about it.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny that after, the shock that it actually happened and all the analysis for weeks and weeks and weeks and coming to terms with it and understanding it and getting everybody's reaction to it, and after, it finally dies down, then the trade actually happens. And both teams can actually mention it on their website and tweet it out. It's kind of funny. It's kind of a stupid system, but that's another story. Carson's going to talk tomorrow early afternoon. Not taking questions from the Philadelphia media, only the Indiana media. So whatever. Be that
I get it. And I don't know if that was his decision. I'm sure he would rather not do it, but the Colts might have said, we're just going to stop that right here.
Yeah, could be. But anyway, I don't make a big deal about that, but it's interesting because we've never had a chance to talk. I mean, we haven't talked to him since after the Green Bay game, December 6th when he got benched. So it's been a while. A lot's happened since then. Usually when teams issue prepared statements, there's not a lot of substance in them. But it was a little different today with Howie's comments about Carson. He was very blunt in the statement, very to the point, and answered some questions that I think have been lingering.
Yeah, they didn't really try to hide it. They basically said Carson wanted out. So we looked at it and we said it can help us and we're going to get it done, which is that's what we all kind of knew, that Carson didn't want to be here anymore. I think the Eagles were certainly more open to the idea of figuring out a way to make the relationship work. Right. I think that's fair. I think after the season, even they hoped that they'd be able to sit down with Carson and figure this out and move past it. But I also think pretty quickly after the season ended, they realized that that relationship was just not repairable, and he wanted out. And it's not like to absolve the Eagles of blame, because a lot led to that point. It's not like all of a sudden Carson wanted out. I mean, there were obviously a lot of steps to get there, from him being drafted, and there a lot happened before then. But I think it is fair to say that Carson wanted out, and Howie didn't try to hide that in his statement.
Right. And I think when people ask whose fault it is, it's not any one person. I mean, I certainly think drafting Jalen Hurts didn't help. I certainly think that was a big part of it, but you'd also like to see Carson react better to it. So I think there's plenty of blame to go around. It's with these things, sometimes it just happens. The relationship, for whatever reason, I think there was a real sense that if they moved on from Doug, then Carson would want to stay, or would be at least talked into staying. But it went way beyond Doug. And I mean, it's been a tumultuous few years for Carson Wentz in Philadelphia. And, with the getting hurt in LA, December of 2017 and missing the Super Bowl run, losing out on MVP most likely because of that injury. then getting hurt again in 18, the injury in the Seattle game. I mean, the whole Nick thing. You would have liked to have seen him try to work through all that, but he couldn't, and he didn't want to. He chose not to, and you don't want to be too hard on him for that. But you would have liked to have seen him be a little tougher through some adversity and some difficulty, and try to make it work here. But I think if you're the Eagles, once you realize that he doesn't want to be here, you don't want him here anymore. There's no reason to. They could have played hardball with him and not traded him, but that doesn't benefit anybody. So they get potentially a 1 and a 3, and in a rebuilding stage, and move on from a guy whose future is unknown. I mean, I don't know if he'll ever play better than he did last year. I just don't know. I think he will, but I don't think anybody really knows exactly who he is as a QB anymore. So, and he's not a kid. So, it still boggles my mind that it came to this. I mean, it's really, if you had said even in September that this would happen, yeah, you think you were crazy, but here we are.
Yeah, it's crazy. You mentioned the compensation, and look, we talked about this when the actual trade went down, but there's two ways to look at the compensation. One is that it's obviously not good enough for a guy you thought was a franchise quarterback, and you paid all that. Like, that's that side of it. You say it's not good enough. On the flip side, everyone knew you needed to trade him, right? Like, once the franchise guy doesn't want to be here anymore, you don't have a choice. Like, right now, the Texans are trying to play hardball and act like they don't have to trade Deshaun Watson. They have to trade Deshaun Watson. They have no choice. Like, you can't keep him. He's not going to play. So I don't know if it would have gotten to that point with Wentz, but they had to move on. So to get back a third-round pick and what we think will be a first-round pick, the conditions have to be met. As a reminder there, the conditions are either for that second-round pick to become a first, it's either Carson plays 75% of the Colts offensive snaps next year, or he plays 70% and they make the playoffs. It was interesting, though, the way both teams framed that pick. The Colts called it a conditional second-round pick. The Eagles called it a conditional first-round pick. I mean, technically, the Colts are correct because that's the normal way you phrase this. But I kind of like that little spin from the Eagles, showing that no, we're going to get a first-round pick here.
Yeah, and it's if you're the Eagles, you want him to play well enough to kick in one of those triggers to make it a first-round pick. But you don't want him to play too well that you look really stupid for trading him. So, and if you're an Eagles fan, you want that pick to be as high as possible in the first round. So you want him to play a lot, but you want the Colts to lose a lot of games. So
Which probably won't happen. I think that pick's probably going to end up in at best, low 20s, high teens.
It's going to be 21. I'm predicting 21, but there's a chance. I mean, there's certainly a chance that, anything can happen, but you got to really balance it out when you're rooting during a Colts game. But I'm really curious to see what he says. If he's, because Carson has a way of he's never controversial in press conferences. He's very bland, and I kind of expect him to just say that's water under the bridge. I'm moving on. Thank everybody in Philadelphia, but it was, he'll say something like, it was time for a change, and hopefully change for the better. I don't think he's gonna, I don't think he's gonna say any headline grabbing quotes or anything like that.
All right. So say you could wear like those glasses with the fake nose and you're Frank Rubin, Indianapolis reporter showing up for the press conference. What one question would you want to ask Carson?
Well, if this isn't a made up thing, so can I ask a question that would get me fired? I'd probably not. All right, I don't want to say that, but I would say Carson. A lot of quarterbacks. I would say Carson. Why did you feel? Why did the Eagles drafting Jalen Hurts in the second round affect you so deeply? Or I would, why did why was that something you couldn't play through or deal with better? I would word it better than that, but I would work on the wording. But that's what I would ask him. I would ask him, how much of a factor Jalen Hurts was, or just why did you let that get to you so much? Because it's clear that it did.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And he would be evasive, but it's a fair question. I think I would just ask him about the relationship with the franchise and, how it got so bad and why he felt like it was irreparable to the point where he needed a fresh start. And I hope that question is asked, because I think those are Eagles questions that we would obviously ask if we were allowed in the press conference. But I think it's also information that Indianapolis will want to know too, because they're trying to figure out the makeup of their new quarterback. And there are some serious questions about the way his time ended in a city that made him the franchise quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see how much of that stuff comes up and or if it's all just an eye at the future. And I won't blame any Colts reporters or Indy reporters for just looking at the Colts and looking forward. But I hope some of those questions do get answered, or at least asked.
That's the problem with not having Philly guys, is that those guys are going to rightfully ask questions that don't really, they're not germane to Eagles fans or Eagles media. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they get asked. We have a spy in there, but I don't think he'll be able to.
Yeah, I don't think so. It does kind of remind you of the Donovan presser when he went to Washington. And how many Eagles reporters were there that day?
I think it was just me, Les Bowen, and Jeff McClain. And the funny thing was, I think it was Easter. It was Easter of.
No, well, he got traded on Easter.
Oh yeah, so I guess it was a day later or two. But I know I was at the old WIP studio doing like a 10 to 2 shift when they announced when the presser was. It was the next morning in Washington, or actually at their facility out in Herndon, Virginia, out near Dulles Airport. So it didn't make sense to go home. I'd get home at 3:00 and I'd have to leave at like 6:00. So I just left WIP at like 2 a.m. and I found a motel somewhere in like halfway, like in the middle of Maryland somewhere. I had no clothes, I had no toiletries, I had nothing, but I didn't have time to go home. So I get to this presser and I'm wearing like ratty clothes and everything, and I haven't shaved, and they're doing one of these things where they pass the mic around, and the PR guys from the Washington football team wouldn't call in any Philly writers, and we had gone all the way down there, and so Les and I just started blurting out questions to Donovan without the microphone, and Donovan was cool about it. He answered them, and the PR guys were pissed at us. And that was when some guy from the Washington Post, and I forget who it was behind me, asked Donovan, when you go in the Hall of Fame, since Philadelphia was, treated you so poorly, will you go in as a member of he didn't say Washington football team, but he said the former name of the team at the time. And I just looked at the guy like, that's such a stupid question in so many ways. A, you don't go into the Pro Football Hall of Fame as anything. You just go in. That's baseball. You go in as like a Met or a Philly. But also, Donovan, we knew Donovan was washed up at that point. He couldn't play anymore. And I think he went 5-8 with Washington. So it was just to think that he was going to do anything with that team to warrant going in the Hall of Fame it was the most absurd question I've ever heard in my life. And then I just kind of looked at him, and then he wanted to fight me after the presser. He's like, what, you got a problem with my question? I said, yeah, it was the stupidest question I've ever heard. And McClain's like, Rube, let's just get out of here. Yeah, that's so great. It was an interesting day, but
So what time's your flight to Indy in the morning?
What's that?
What time's your flight to Indy in the morning?
I know. Hey, we made that flight many, many times for the combine, but hopefully by next year, when they're trading guys, we can actually be there in person. That'd
be nice. The other big reason the deadline mattered on Wednesday, 4 p.m. Derek Barnett was watching the clock and that's got to be a great feeling when the clock strikes 4. You go, that's $10 million in my pocket. Well, not in his pocket, but that will be in his pocket very soon. Guaranteed money. So basically, if you haven't been following that situation, he had this is the 5th year of his rookie deal, and the Eagles exercised that option last year. So basically, it's a $10 million 1-year salary that's all guaranteed, but it doesn't become guaranteed until the first day of the new league year, and that kicked off at 4 p.m. on Wednesday. So for a long time, our thought and everyone's thought was that the Eagles are either going to figure out a way to come up with a contract extension for him, or they're going to cut him and not pay $10 million. But the Eagles didn't want to cut him. They didn't want to get rid of a 24-year-old pass rusher. And earlier this week, when we started seeing the contracts come around for really similar players, and Mario Okwara is one of them, obviously. That's a hard name to say.
It is.
But that deal was, 3 years, $39 million, 13 APY. That's about probably what Barnett would get on the open market. So are you willing to let that guy go, or do you want to pay that? So right now the Eagles are they're on the hook for $10 million this year, and they still have time. If they want to try to extend him, they can, but worst comes to worst, they're going to pay him $10 million this year. And he's not a $10 million player, but ultimately they just viewed him as too valuable to get rid of.
Yeah, there's a few things that come into play here. Number one, like you said, he's 24, and I think the Eagles expect him, to be a 12, 13 sack type of guy. He has the ability. He hasn't been able to stay healthy, and I think he needs more moves. Hopefully, that's something Tracy Rocker can work with him on, the new D-line coach. But also, you say he's not a $10 million player. I guess he is now. Because the way the market for edge rushers has reset, he really is. And that $10 million, it's guaranteed. There's no bonus. That becomes his base salary. So he gets 1/17 of that every week during the season. So he'll get like $588,000 a week starting with week 1, but it's guaranteed. It's just not a bonus. So since it's a 1-year deal, it counts entirely against their cap for this year. But yeah, they can still sign him to a long-term deal. I think as soon as some of those deals came through, there was no way. I think we said this on Monday. There was no way they were going to get him to sign a long-term deal, because why would he? When the market starts rising like that, what's that saying about high tides? Lift all ships. That's what happened, and he became much, much more valuable when some of those other deals started getting executed, and it put the Eagles in a position. I'd love to know, and that's why you wait. If you're Derek Barnett, that's why you wait. You have all the leverage. Either way, you're going to either become a free agent or get $10 million or get a long-term deal that you want. He had all the leverage, and then when these contracts started coming in, like you said, he's like, all right, I'm just going to sit back and cut me if you want. I'll go sign, a 3-year, $39 million deal somewhere, or pay me the $10 million. And he's a free agent again at the end of the year.
Yeah, there was no reason for him to jump at anything less than a market deal, and the market deal is really good right now. And $10 million guaranteed is still a nice contract. So, yeah, for him, it didn't make sense to sign a below market deal to stay here with a team that's not very good. Like there's no reason to do that unless he's just blindly loyal to the franchise that drafted him, and that's just bad business. So, I think, but I do also think it makes sense for the Eagles to keep him at that price. And that's something I didn't think I would ever say. Even, for months I was saying you can't keep him at that price. But
we both were.
Yeah, but once you start to see the other deals around the league and you realize that, well, he's pretty valuable. And, this buys you some time. It buys you another year to try to figure out an extension. If they look at him and they think he's still ascending, he has tools, that ankle flexion we talked about in 2017 when he came out of the draft, that shows up on tape. And he's had some really great moments. Like Trent Williams right now is the highest paid tackle in the NFL. He wrecked him this year.
He did.
Just wrecked him. Like he has that ability, and he needs to be more consistent. He needs to stay healthy. But were the Eagles really willing to just say, sorry, for it's too much money, 10 million. We're going to cut you and we're going to just deal without you for now. That to me would be risky because they don't have a ton either. I mean, I know we like Josh Sweat, but do we know if Josh Sweat is the answer? I mean, we don't know if Barnett is either, but I mean, we've only really seen flashes from Sweat too. We've seen he's been a little more consistent last year and the previous year, but I don't know if he's a real starter either.
Yeah, and they don't have a lot of players who are young and promising or young and have a ceiling. They just don't have guys like that.
And he's a good player. He's good.
He's good. Yeah, he's good. But the production's been disappointing. I mean, like I said, I think I put in one of my 10 observations. He's averaging, fewer sacks per game than Mike Mamula in his first 4 years. And, I mean, everyone loved to call Mike Mamula a bust, which he wasn't, but that was, the sense that he was such a disappointing player. And their production's similar. I think Barnett has like 5 fewer sacks. He's missed 16 games. So that's a concern too, but it's the right thing to do. And they have BG back, they have Sweat back, they have Fletcher back, and they have Derek Barnett back. So they have their top 4 pass rushers from last year. We know the GM and the franchise values pass rush. So I mean, they go in with obviously not a need at edge rusher.
Yeah, and like we said, this buys them time to get a deal done because they didn't need this cap space. We looked at it when, a few months ago when we looked at this, we thought they're going to need that 10 mil to become cap compliant. And they didn't. They figured out other ways to do it, a multitude of different ways. They restructured or extended just about every veteran they had on the roster to do it, but they got there and they didn't need to cut Barnett to do it. So, I mean, when you look at it as a whole too, that's a pretty good sign because I think a lot of people were worried that looking at the cap situation, they're going to have to cut players they want to keep to make this work. And that ended up not being the case.
I wonder if the late restructures that we saw, I think it was Rodney and Jake Elliott. I wonder if Howie and the front office thought, we're going to be able to get, even a few days ago, we were going to be able to get, Barnett signed to a long-term deal that's going to cut his cap for 2021. And when that didn't happen, when those deals started popping up on Monday, if they're like, okay, we're going to have to clear a little more space to get that 10 million in there.
Yeah, I don't know. And they're still going to have to clear some space. They're under right now. They are cap compliant once the Marquise Goodwin contract was gone. And we'll get into that in a little bit. They became cap compliant then, but they're still going to need some space because they'd ideally still like to sign a free agent or two, and they're going to have the rookie class to sign at some point. So they are going to need some more space, but they can get there and they can still get there with Barnett. They just didn't have to do it right now.
Yeah. And that's one thing. And we could talk about this maybe later in the week. They're still going to be in a position to sign a couple guys. They're not going to be huge numbers, but it's not like they won't be able to sign anyone. They will. They'll have that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. We wanted to mention, how about this for our first guest on Takeoff with John Clark? He got Doug Pederson and Josh Pederson, Doug's son, on there for the inaugural episode. I mean, that is a heck of a get. So congratulations to John. And it was really good stuff. The interview started, and please find that podcast wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to it, but also check out that first episode because it was great. They started off talking about Josh, who's a tight end prospect out of Louisiana, Monroe.
He's pretty good, by the way.
He is pretty good. He's a legit prospect.
He led BCS in touchdowns by tight ends with 9 2 years ago. And Pro Football Reference does not designate positions for college players. So I had to go through every single guy and see if he was a wide receiver or a tight end. I was not happy about that. But he's not a bad player.
No, he's a legit prospect. I mean, he's not a day 1 or 2 guy. He's maybe a day 3, but honestly, probably more likely to be a priority free agent. But those guys make the league all the time. Noah Tagoa last year, our favorite player, was a priority free agent. And he made it with the Colts. but we'll see what happens there. But it was cool to see Doug in that light, kind of talk about being a father of a football player and how interesting that is. But then, of course, John couldn't let him go without getting some Eagles questions in. It's the first time Doug has spoken publicly since the Eagles fired him. So I was intrigued. I know when we heard about the interview, I couldn't wait to hear what Doug had to say. He took the high road, like you'd expect him to do on a lot of it, but he did kind of confirm some of the things that were out there. I think the most newsworthy thing was that he basically confirmed a big difference of opinion between him and the organization was over the coaching staff. And I'm paraphrasing here, but Doug basically said, I wanted my guys, you give me my guys, let me pick my staff, and then it's on me. It's on me if I fail. And it was pretty clear the Eagles didn't want to do that. And the one name we heard a lot was Press Taylor, but there were others. Matt Burke would have probably been his defensive coordinator next year. And I think the organization really wanted to go in different directions. And that part was the most interesting to me.
Yeah, I really had my doubts whether he wanted to keep coaching, but from what he said, he said, I wish I had the opportunity to turn that thing around. And he seemed disappointed that he didn't. It was weird to see him so relaxed because every time we saw him this year, he was so stressed. The team was losing and he was under fire, and it was a tough year for him. So I'm happy.
I really liked what John Clark said, by the way, that we looked at Doug, who was so relaxed, and he said, you kind of look like a president, like after they leave office, like they're weathered a little bit, but you can see like they're breathing a little easier now. Yeah,
no doubt about it. One interesting thing I want to throw in about Josh Pederson, Doug's son. He didn't play football. When Doug was in Philly the first time under Andy, he went to Morristown High School in Burlington County, which we used to cover, and he was the Burlington County Times Golfer of the Year. But he didn't play football. He was a good golfer. He was an all-state golfer. And the story about him being Golfer of the Year was written by our friend Connor Hughes, who now covers the Jets for the Athletics. So I thought that was pretty cool. But then when Doug went to KC with Andy, he started playing golf at his new high school there outside KC. But as a junior, picked up football and then went to his dad's old college, which has a different name now. But it's kind of a cool story. And, I think everybody's kind of rooting for him, certainly. It's kind of – I love the notion that he interviewed over a Zoom call with Howie and Jake Rosenberg from the Eagles front office, which is hilarious that they just fired his dad. It's pretty funny. Doug also talked about Carson, not as in depth, but said he didn't think they had any communication problems. He said he's rooting for Carson. He likes Carson and thinks he'll do well in Indianapolis. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, that was interesting. I wonder, I'd like to hook him up to a lie detector test on that one. That was the only part that I was thinking. I wonder how much of that is true, because there was clearly a disconnect between him and Carson last year, and we don't know the extent of it. We've heard reports about it, and I don't think we'll ever know, truthfully. I don't know, because I think that they both probably have different perceptions of that relationship, and I think they probably each have different truths on it, if that makes sense. Sometimes something can happen and like I see it differently than you see it. And I'm guessing that's probably the case between those two guys.
What's going to happen? We'll be at the combine and we'll run into someone at a bar at 1 a.m. who was in the middle of all of it, and we'll get the real story.
Yeah, but then I won't remember it the next day.
You'll text me, Rube, I have a great story. Next morning, are you going to write that? Write what?
I do want to mention before you get to the read, please subscribe to Take Off with John Clark. The first episode's great. Second episode, Michael Blackson, the actor who is always on the Eagles sideline, big Eagles fan, came here, immigrated from Africa, but grew up in Philly and is a huge Eagles fan.
Yeah, I've seen the list of some of the upcoming guests, and it's a great. I think this is going to be. It's a perfect medium for John, because he's such a good interviewer, and he's one of those guys, and I'm not, but he's one of those guys that gets his subjects to really open up. They feel relaxed around him, and they say things to him that they wouldn't say to other people. And that's a unique interviewing skill. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun once that gets going. Hey, Eagles fans, it's time to look. We're a year away now. Time to look forward to your dream vacation in 1 year, the Philadelphia Eagles Fan Cruise. Now, tickets are selling out fast. The ship sails March of next year for 7 days and 7 nights with Eagles fans and only Eagles fans. Book your tickets today at PhiladelphiaEaglesCruise.com.
Now, Rube, you've been doing this for quite a while. The Marquise Goodwin thing, that's a new one even for you, right?
I'm looking at the tweet, and I think Mike Garafolo was the first one to tweet it out. And I'm like, you know, you kind of rub your eyes and you hit reload. And like, if I look, is this really, you know, there's a blue check mark there. So it's really him. I've never heard of anything like this before. And I think if it wasn't for COVID, this wouldn't have happened. But there was a clause written into his contract that sent his rights back to the 49ers, and a really bizarre story. He ended up never playing for the Eagles. He was never even in the building.
Yeah, it is really strange. And on the official transaction wire from the NFL, it said his rights reverted back to San Francisco per the trade terms. So I don't know. We haven't figured out exactly what the trade terms were. I'm guessing it had something to do with the COVID opt-out, possibly maybe a restructured contract or maybe even the physical. I mean, since he never got to the building, maybe he just never took the physical. I think all that is probably on the table. Anyway, he reverts to San Francisco. They ended up cutting him on Wednesday because they didn't want to pay $4.2 million for him either. But the interesting part of this for the Eagles is that they get back the 49ers 7th round pick this year. And the way you look at it is last year, the Eagles traded to get Goodwin and the 49ers moved up 20 spots. Then the Eagles never got the player, so the 49ers had to give them something back. And I didn't look at the value chart, but I'm assuming 20 spots in the 6th round is probably pretty equivalent to that 7th round pick the Eagles are going to get back.
Yeah, I would guess so. People are asking, are they going to sign him now? You can get him for minimum wage. I kind of doubt it. I think they've kind of moved on. I didn't have high expectations of him anyway. I mean, he's been hurt almost his entire career. He's had one good year in 7 or 8 seasons. I know he's a high school long jump record holder and an Olympian. So I never got the opportunity to talk track with him. Which I was
thinking that just for you personally, you're probably hoping you'd get him in a locker room and corner him for a half
I have
hour.
my list of Eagles record holders for every track event, and I don't know if I have to take him off that now. You know, because he's
is Frank Gore still on there?
I don't think he ran track.
Okay.
But, there's that whole list of guys like LaCharles Bentley and Frank Gore and Jatavis Brown. The all-time – that would be a good gallery, the all-time Eagles that were never Eagles.
Yeah, I like that.
But it's it does leave the Eagles without any real experience at wide receiver. Greg Ward becomes their I mean, not that like he was ever here, but with Alshon gone, Deshaun gone, or Alshon about to be gone, Deshaun released. Greg Ward's your most experienced wide receiver with 80 some odd career catches, and after that, it's Travis Fulgham is your next most experienced with 5 games worth of production. So it's really interesting. I mean, obviously, this isn't the roster they're going to go into the season with, but there's. Jalen Reagor's got some upside. I think Quez did some nice things at the end of the year. Fulgham, who knows? Who knows what he'll become? I have no idea. I think there's a chance they would sign once things settle and the market starts to – I think you can get some receivers cheap because receivers aren't signing anywhere.
Yeah, I would do that. I think there's some value in having a veteran in the receiver room.
Well, we've talked about this. The Eagles have – I mean, their record with veteran – wide receivers it's awful. I mean, that kind of the Reuben Randalls and Kamar Akins and Mike Wallace's and like all those guys who
Marcus Wheaton
had like 50,
TJ Graham.
Who was it?
TJ Graham, Marcus Wheaton.
Marcus Wheaton. Those guys had all had like decent seasons, and they get here and they like don't even make it through training camp. So it's not a great track record, but I think they'll sign somebody. They're going to draft one at some point. Still obviously could be the first round. I still think they're taking Kyle Pitts. But right now, I mean, it's a position with a lot of question marks. And I think we've been saying that for most of the last 30 years.
Yeah, that's true. It'll be interesting to see what they do there. Zach Ertz, still an Eagle. No trade yet. He is available for a trade. We can report here first.
Exclusively.
Obviously, he's been open for a trade for a while. The Eagles have been trying to trade him. Hasn't happened. I think there are some teams that make sense. I put together a list of 5. We don't have to spend a lot of time on this, but let me just read off the teams that I put on my list of 5, and you tell me which 1 or 2 teams you think make the most sense. I have the Bills, the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Seahawks, and the Colts. Those are the 5 teams that I put on my list.
I think he's going to Buffalo. I think that's a place he could really resurrect his career with that offensive coordinator and that quarterback. The Bills haven't had a tight end with 700 yards since 1967. Isn't that crazy? I think Pete Metzelaars was the last good tight end they have. They just never have tight ends. He could go up there and really add a lot to that offense. And with that quarterback, that play caller, I know he's Sean McDermott wasn't here with him, but I could see Sean McDermott really, really appreciating Zach Ertz's game and what he brings to a locker room. So I think that's where he'll end up. Obviously, the Colts, the way these two franchises are exchanging players, the Colts makes a lot of sense too. I think San Diego's definitely in the mix as well. I'm guessing. I would say Buffalo first, San Diego second, Colts third.
Los Angeles.
Oh yeah, they did move, didn't they? That would be San Diego to me.
Yeah, that's a tough one to get out of your head. Yeah, I think
it used to be the best trip ever, man, when the Eagles played in San Diego.
Yeah, I love San Diego. It's a great city. Yeah, but I still think the trade's going to happen, and it kind of feels like we've heard the reports out there that if the Eagles don't get what they want, they'll just bring Zach Ertz back. But it feels a lot like the Carson situation that you've been this far. I don't know how you just say, yeah, sorry, Zach, we couldn't trade you. You got to come back and play for the team. It's pretty clear he doesn't want to be on the team anymore. He doesn't. And it's clear he wants a fresh start. So I don't know how you to me, that's just a bargaining tactic to try to drive the price up.
But I do think there's more of a chance he'll be back than I thought there was that Carson would be back. I think it's minuscule. I think it's small. But I think there is some chance. Because if you're Zach Ertz, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess if he gets cut, is he going to get $8.25 billion if he signs somewhere? I don't know.
I have no idea. It's tough to put a price on him right now.
It is. I mean, the 2 guys that the Patriots signed, I mean, they're a lot younger than him, but they don't have anywhere near the production, and they both got huge deals.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell. I don't think anybody really knows where he is in his career. I wouldn't be surprised if Zach Ertz has a big bounce back year in the right situation next year. 65 catches, 725 yards, 5 touchdowns. But
we've heard that he'd be willing now to play out this deal, which makes sense because it's still, it's $8.5 million this year. And his value's never been lower than it is right now. So if he plays this year and he has a good season, then he can recoup something and he can get a bigger contract at this time next year.
Yeah, will be interesting. I still think he gets shipped, but I think there's still a 10% chance he's back, but no bigger than that.
Yeah, I'm probably less on that than you. Let's real quick before we end this. I have the numbers in front of me from the Jalen Mills deal and the Nelson Agholor deal in New England, as New England's just throwing out, but they're playing with monopoly money up there this offseason. But Jalen Mills contract, and this is kind of some of the funny numbers you get in free agency because it's a 4-year deal worth $24 million, so an APY of 6. But really, the guaranteed money on this deal is up after 2022, so it's not as big of a deal as you thought it was initially. He has a total guarantee of $9 million, a signing bonus of 2.5. So in a way, this deal has less guaranteed money per season than his deal with the Eagles. The Eagles, well, not less, but pretty close. I mean, the Eagles gave him $4 million 1 year. This is really a 2-year deal with $9 million. So it's pretty close, and it's still a good deal for him. It's still good money. It's the best contract he's ever had, but it's not as big as it looked initially.
None of them are.
Yeah.
None of them are. And that's why I always tell people that initial number that gets tweeted out as soon as the deal gets announced, don't believe it until you see the real numbers, which are basically the guarantee and the base salaries that have a portion of them guaranteed, and the bonus money. I mean, that's what you want to see. Sometimes they'll because the agents want the big numbers out there so they look good. And the people tweeting them out will do anything the agents tell them to do. So they'll just tweet out, yeah, just give me the numbers, I'll tweet them out. Most of the time they include, like, if this guy makes every imaginable incentive, like you see, this guy signed a 3-year, $39 million deal. And then you look at the deal and there's like a $10 million bonus for, if he's Super Bowl MVP or something. So take them all with a grain of salt until you see Dave or I or someone you trust tweet out the actual numbers.
Yeah, exactly. And there, even in like Nelson Agholor's contract, there are some extra incentives in each of those years. And that, I like writing in incentives in a receiver's contract like Agholor, but he got a nice contract, Rube. I mean, this is it's a 2-year deal with $16 million in guaranteed money. 10 of it comes in a signing bonus. I mean, this is a nice deal for him.
He's made a lot of money in his career, even though he made minimum last year with Oakland. I did that on purpose. But good for him. Yeah. I mean, he bet on himself. And
he didn't have a choice.
He had no choice. That's true. 9 million, 9 touchdowns and 900 yards, 8 touchdowns, 900 yards. I don't know if he'll ever be a great player, but he's Nelly.
If he becomes a great player, he can make up to $26 million in 2 years on this deal.
It's interesting. You have to take a look at those incentives, but I'm really curious about this. It's such an un-Patriots way. I mean, Belichick's doing everything different. I mean, they've never done this. They've always been a team and they never had to, because they could just surround Tom with 52 undrafted free agents, and they'd go 13-3 and win a Super Bowl or get to the AFC Championship game. But all of a sudden things changed, and they've changed the way they're going about business. They're overpaying for a lot of people, I think. But, we'll see how it goes.
Everyone overpays in free agency, though.
Yeah, that's true.
But they did the Eagles a service, though, by signing Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, who were really the 2 top tight ends on the market. That's great news for the Eagles, because not only did Henry leave the Chargers where Ertz could go, but also, if it's pretty simple, if 2 of the top tight ends go to one location, it means there's other teams out there that didn't get one of them. So
yeah,
I think the market has improved for Zach Ertz over the last week.
Yeah, exactly. I would agree with that. Really unusual for a team to sign 2 guys at the same position in the first day or 2 of free agency, or the tampering window, whatever want to call it, because usually if you really want the one guy, you sign him and then you wait, because prices are going to come down. So it's kind of a really strange way to do business. But hey, he's won more Super Bowls than I have. So
it's intriguing too, because those guys, they're different. Like, you can kind of see it working. If you can see what they're thinking, and it'll be fascinating to watch that team.
Yeah.
And how they utilize them. Yeah,
no doubt. More to come, I'm sure, in the next couple of days. There'll be news with Alshon and Malik Jackson. There'll be news with Ertz.
Well, there better be news with Alshon and Malik, because they have to cut them,
right,
or they have $25 million guaranteed salaries next year.
Each. Yeah.
So yeah, they'll be gone.
If Howie forgets, that's $50 million under next year's cap.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. We'll be back with you later in the week. We'll see if the Eagles actually make some sort of move. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor. Rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button there. For Rube, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye. We'll talk to you guys soon.